A golden carriage races through the snow-covered streets of St. Petersburg in the harsh winter of 1782. Inside, in the luxurious interior, a 53-year-old woman studies military reports while her generals eagerly await orders. This is not just any queen, this is Catherine II, known as Catherine the Great. Of German origin, she became more Russian than the Russians themselves and turned a barbaric country into a world power. But behind the imperial facade lie intimate secrets, unbridled passions, and scandals that shook European courts for decades. How did this insignificant German princess manage to conquer the world's greatest empire, maintain dozens of lovers, become a patron of the arts like a true Renaissance patron, and pass away surrounded by legends that still spark heated debates among historians? Sophia Augusta Frederica of Anhalt-Zerbst was born in 1729 into a small German aristocratic family in Stettin, Prussia. Her father, Christian August, was a Prussian general with limited resources, and her mother, Johanna Elizabeth, was a princess with ambitions that exceeded her social status. This combination of relative poverty and grandiose aspirations deeply shaped the personality of the future empress. From an early age, Sophie displayed an outstanding intellect and a thirst for knowledge that amazed her tutors, who were accustomed to the mediocrity of the German aristocracy. She devoured books on philosophy, history, and politics, developing a complex understanding of the mechanisms of power that would later serve her well in her career. Moreover, her fierce ambition set her apart from other princesses of her time. In 1743, she was presented with an opportunity that would change her life. She was chosen as the bride of Peter III, heir to the Russian throne. This choice was political. Empress Elizabeth Petrovna was looking for a Protestant princess who could easily be converted to Orthodox Christianity and who did not have complicated diplomatic ties. Sophia seemed ideal, young, malleable, and without significant political connections. The journey to Russia in 1744 was a real revelation for the 15-year-old girl. St. Petersburg was a city of extremes. Magnificent palaces built on frozen swamps, nobles dressed in French clothes and speaking rough Russian, and a court that combined European sophistication with Asian cruelty. Sophia immediately realized that she had come to a place where her mind and ambitions could lead her to greater things than any duchy in Germany. Her first strategic decision was to fully embrace her new Russian identity. She learned the language with fanatical determination, studied the country's history with sincere enthusiasm, and converted to Orthodox Christianity with such devotion that even skeptical priests were impressed. On the day of her conversion, she took the name Catherine Alexeyevna, symbolically reborn as a Russian princess. Her marriage to Peter in 1745 proved to be a disaster from the start. Peter was young, immature, and overly militaristic, which offended the patriotic feelings of the Russians. Moreover, he showed little interest in his wife, preferring to play with toy soldiers and discuss Prussian military tactics. Catherine soon realized that she had married a man who was not only intellectually weak, but also politically dangerous. In the early years of her marriage, Catherine focused on strengthening her position in the Russian court. She made acquaintances with influential nobles, studied the complex mechanisms of Russian politics, and developed a network of contacts throughout the empire. Moreover, she began to take lovers, at first out of emotional need, and then as a political tool. Her first significant lover was Sergei Saltykov, a young guard officer who gave her not only physical pleasure, but also a political education. Saltykov introduced Catherine to the joys of carnal pleasures and the secrets of the court, teaching her how to navigate the treacherous waters of Russian politics. When she became pregnant in 1754, officially by Peter but possibly by Saltykov, she already knew how to use her sexuality as a political weapon. The birth of the future Paul in 1754 was a turning point in Catherine's life. As the mother of the heir, she acquired a status that was difficult to challenge, but it also awakened Peter's paranoia about his paternity. Imagine, in the 18th century, in the heart of Russia, a passion flaring up that would change the fate of an entire empire. The relationship between Peter III and Catherine, his wife, reached a critical point. Peter began to openly flirt with the idea of divorce, dreaming of a new life with his mistress. Catherine, in turn, had no intention of remaining in the shadows. At that time, in the 1750s, she became a real political force. Catherine opened an intellectual salon where the best minds of Russia gathered. She corresponded with philosophers such as Voltaire and Diderot, and gained a reputation as a patron of the arts and literature. But it was not only this that attracted attention to Catherine. She had love affairs that shocked the court, but it was these that strengthened her political network. Grigory Orlov, one of her most influential lovers, was an ambitious guard officer who saw in Catherine a chance to rise to the top of power. Together, they began to secretly plan Peter's overthrow, combining personal feelings with political necessity. The crisis came in 1762, when Empress Elizabeth died and Peter ascended the throne. His 6-month reign was a disaster. He managed to alienate the Orthodox Church, humiliate the army by withdrawing from a victorious war with Prussia, and even threaten Catherine with divorce for the sake of his German mistress. In this chaos, Catherine and Orlov organized a brilliant coup d'état, which became a model of political synchronization and psychological manipulation. With the help of her lovers and allies among the officers of the Guard, Catherine was able to isolate Peter and force him to abdicate the throne without significant bloodshed. When Peter died shortly thereafter under mysterious circumstances, officially from colic but possibly murdered, Catherine became Empress of Russia at the age of 33. From that moment on, her reign became a symbol of strength and determination. She was determined to prove that a woman, even a foreigner, could rule Russia better than any Russian czar. Catherine immediately began reforms that demonstrated her outstanding mind and intuitive understanding of Russian psychology. Instead of imposing German ideals, she expanded Russian traditions, presenting herself as the legitimate successor to the great czars of the past. Her educational reforms were truly revolutionary. Catherine opened state schools, founded universities, and actively promoted women's education, which was unprecedented at the time. She sincerely believed that education was the key to transforming Russia into a modern power, and she invested enormous resources in educational projects that benefited thousands of her subjects. But Catherine's personal life also remained in the public eye. After her breakup with Orlov, she had a string of love affairs, including some of the most talented men in Russia. Grigory Potemkin, who became her lover in 1774, proved to be the most important in both her personal and political life. Potemkin was not only physically impressive, but also intellectually gifted, combining military genius with political strategic thinking. Their relationship went beyond physical passion and became a political partnership that transformed Russia into an empire. Together, they conquered Crimea, founded new cities, and expanded the borders of the Russian Empire to the shores of the Black Sea. Their correspondence, preserved in Russian archives, reveals an intimate relationship where love intertwined with political collaboration. They referred to each other as husband and wife in private letters, and some historians believe they may have secretly married. Even when their physical relationship ended, their partnership continued until Potemkin's death in 1791. During her 34-year reign, Catherine had 22 known lovers, although the actual number may have been much higher. Each relationship was carefully planned to maximize political gains and satisfy her emotional and physical needs. She developed a system whereby lovers were generously rewarded with property, titles, and positions after the relationship ended, ensuring their loyalty and secrecy. With each new lover, Catherine became increasingly bold, and her later romances were significantly younger than her. Platon Zubov, who became her favorite in 1789, when she was 60 and he was only 22, was a striking example of this trend. Despite criticism, Catherine insisted that her personal happiness was a private matter that did not affect her ability to rule. Catherine's political achievements during her reign were truly remarkable by any standard. Imagine how one woman was able to change the course of an entire country's history. Catherine the Great, who ruled Russia from 1762 to 1796, did not simply govern, she transformed Russia into a powerful European power. Under her leadership, the country's territory increased by more than 200,000 square miles. She made Russia a significant maritime power in the Black Sea and founded more than 100 cities that became important centers of culture and trade. But Catherine did not limit herself to military victories. Her reforms, including the famous Charter of Nobility, radically changed Russia's administrative system, laying the foundations that served the country for centuries. She attracted European artists, writers, and thinkers, creating an atmosphere that could rival Paris or Vienna. Catherine herself wrote plays, political essays, and even fairy tales, demonstrating an intellectual flexibility rare among rulers. Her wars against the Ottoman Empire not only strengthened Russia's position, but also allowed it to become the heir to the Byzantine Empire, fulfilling its dream of access to the Mediterranean Sea. The annexation of Crimea in 1783 was an important event that determined Russian policy for many years to come. At a time when the French Revolution was raging in Europe, Catherine positioned Russia as a bastion of conservatism, providing refuge to French aristocrats and forming coalitions against revolutionary France. However, her correspondence with Voltaire and other philosophers was cut short when Catherine realized that their ideas of equality could threaten the stability of her autocratic regime. Catherine's death in 1796 was sudden but not unexpected for a woman who had lived a full life. She died of a stroke while doing official correspondence in her office and, unfortunately, did not recover. After her death, myths began to emerge that shocked the public. One of the most scandalous rumors claimed that she died as a result of an act with an animal. This fabrication was created by her political enemies, who sought to discredit her reputation. Interestingly, similar rumors arose in 1797 when emigrants were looking for ways to discredit rulers who supported Enlightenment ideas. Despite the obvious falsity of this story, it continued to live on in popular culture, reflecting prejudices against women in power. Documents from that time confirm that Catherine did indeed die of a stroke, which was a fairly common disease for women of her age. Her personal physician, John Rogers, kept detailed records of her health, which have been preserved in archives in both Britain and Russia. There is no medical or testimonial evidence to support these scandalous stories about her death. The myth about the horse says more about how society perceived strong women than about Catherine herself. In an era when female power was considered abnormal, sexual slander was used to discredit female rulers. Catherine was particularly vulnerable to such attacks because her personal life was indeed unusual for her time. These myths, which continue to exist today, overshadow her real achievements as a stateswoman, reformer, and patron of the arts. Catherine the Great was one of the most outstanding figures in world history. She transformed Russia from a peripheral barbarian state into one of the great European powers, establishing cultural and educational traditions that lasted for centuries. Her contribution to political thought was also significant. Her correspondence with French philosophers influenced the development of Enlightenment ideas, and her reforms laid the foundations for a system of government that was adopted by other European rulers. Catherine was one of the first to clearly articulate the state's responsibilities to its citizens. Her system of favorites was innovative. Instead of relying exclusively on the hereditary nobility, she promoted talented individuals based on their merits and personal loyalty. Imagine a woman who was able to change the course of history despite all the obstacles. Catherine the Great, born in Germany, became one of Russia's most influential rulers and left a deep mark on world history. Her reforms were a real challenge to traditional norms, and although they were not always perfect, they were a real breakthrough for their time. She was unable to completely abolish serfdom, but she took steps to soften it. Catherine limited its most brutal manifestations and laid the foundations for future emancipation. This was not an easy decision, as she understood that too drastic changes could lead to chaos in a huge empire. In this context, her caution was not simply political calculation, but a manifestation of a deep understanding of the complexities of governing such a multinational country. Catherine's cultural legacy is perhaps her most significant contribution. She transformed St. Petersburg into one of the cultural capitals of Europe, attracting artists and thinkers from all over the world. Under her patronage, traditions of patronage emerged that influenced the development of Russian culture for many generations to come. For example, the Hermitage, which she founded, became one of the greatest museums in the world, housing priceless works of art. Her personal correspondence with philosophers such as Voltaire and Diderot shows that Catherine was not just a pragmatic autocrat, but a deeply thoughtful woman who constantly reflected on the nature of power and responsibility. She was not afraid to discuss complex issues, which was rare for women of her time. This makes her image even more multifaceted and interesting. However, as is often the case with great personalities, her image was distorted by both her admirers and her opponents. Some praised her as an ideal enlightened ruler, ignoring the contradictions in her policies, while others portrayed her as a cruel and promiscuous woman, forgetting her real achievements. In reality, Catherine was a complex individual who used all the resources at her disposal, including her sexuality, to establish and maintain power in a society where women were not considered capable of ruling effectively. Today, more than 200 years after her death, Catherine the Great is receiving a more balanced recognition from historians. Contemporary research highlights her contribution to the development of Russian politics and culture, placing her personal life in the right context. She emerges as one of the most fascinating figures in history, a woman who overcame gender and social constraints to become one of the most effective rulers of her time. Her influence is still felt today when issues of female leadership and sexuality are discussed. Catherine proved that women can hold the highest political offices without renouncing their humanity. But her life also shows how patriarchal societies use sexual slander to discredit strong women. Interestingly, Catherine was particularly close to her grandson, Alexander III, the future emperor. She personally educated him, passing on her ideas about enlightened rule. This connection influenced his reforms when he became emperor and even his victory over Napoleon. Thus, Catherine's intellectual legacy lived on after her death. Her architectural projects forever changed the face of Russia. She not only expanded the Winter Palace and created the Hermitage, but also commissioned the construction of numerous palaces and gardens that rivaled Versailles in splendor. The city of Odessa, founded during her reign, became one of the most important ports in Eastern Europe, highlighting her strategic approach to urban development. Catherine the Great is a symbol of the triumph of intellect and determination over limitations. From a small German princess, she became one of the most powerful rulers of her time, thanks to her education, flexibility, and unbridled ambition. Her story inspires not only women, but everyone who faces seemingly insurmountable obstacles on the path to their dreams. Imagine that even the strongest barriers can be broken down if approached with intelligence and determination. These are not just words, but a reality confirmed by history. Let us recall how, at the beginning of the 20th century, in the year 1901, the world faced incredible challenges. At that time, events were taking place that changed the course of history. Remember how in 1905 the first revolution broke out in Russia. People tired of poverty and oppression took to the streets demanding change. It was a time when ordinary workers and peasants united and began to fight for their rights. Their courage and determination became a symbol of hope for many. But it was not only in Russia that significant events were taking place. At the same time, tensions were growing between the great powers of Europe. Conflicts that seemed irresolvable were building up like a snowball, ready to avalanche. In 1914, World War I began, claiming millions of lives and changing the map of Europe forever. And so, in this chaos, we see how the determination and intellect of people striving for change can lead to incredible results. Remember how, in 1918, after the end of the war, the October Revolution took place in Russia. This event was the culmination of many years of struggle for justice and equality. People united under red banners were able to overthrow the old order and create a new society based on the ideals of socialism. Thus, history shows us that even the most difficult obstacles can be overcome if we act with intelligence and determination. Each of us can become part of this great struggle for a better future.